Welcome back to the discussion, Securely Managing Access and Identity in Government, sponsored by Radiant Logic on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guest today is Dieter Schuler, Vice President of Business Development at Radiant Logic. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. Earlier, you mentioned your company's been around since 2000 and has worked with many, many different federal agencies. Well, in Missouri, they say, show me, don't they? Show me. Give me an idea of an agency you've helped with this federated identity concept.
So one of the things that's common is the need for different user populations to come together for collaboration purposes. So think about a portal or think about a knowledge sharing environment. You look at an organization like FEMA. When they respond to any kind of a disaster, there's people from different agencies that have to come together, and each one of those agencies tends to own their identities. And in fact, if you go to some of these agencies and say, give me a copy of your identity, from a business and political perspective, that doesn't go over very well because these guys all want to own and control that, and rightfully so. So how do you allow them to keep control, but give them a way to publish and secure that so that they can play part of the bigger role? And so, you have a project within FEMA, a bunch of different agencies come together. You need to know who can fly a helicopter because you don't want people that aren't authorized to fly a helicopter flying a helicopter. All of that information exists within some of these local data stores across these local agencies. When that project is done, that whole group dissipates, right? So you see that in the world of FEMA. You see that when you start to bring together people from different airports at TSA PreCheck, and many other examples like that.
And when I think of FEMA, no one puts on their calendar, okay, September 15th, we're going to have a hurricane, and Dieter, make sure you get to work at 8 o'clock that morning. No, you have to do it dynamically, and it could be middle of the night, could be on Christmas. I mean, these characteristics of identity management are dynamic and unpredictable.
Absolutely. The success of that entire effort is based on how fast they respond and how effectively they respond. So if you have information about all the people, you understand what their profile is, you understand what they can and can't do, you have a successful operation, right? And that applies, by the way, to not only things like FEMA, but also any kind of joint programs within the DID or anything that is combat command within the DoD.
You know, mobile is important here. And when we talk about hurricanes and FEMA, you got to think about mobile because it's not going to be within the Beltway here. And I keep thinking of PIV and mobile. And there's a quote that's floating around the industry. It says, PIV may or may not be around, but the PIV process is what's really valuable here. So the concept may change, but the process is important.
Absolutely. And today it's a PIV card or a CAC card. Tomorrow it might be some other sort of certificate-based strong authentication or even other forms of strong authentication. The idea is that you should be able to change that without having to go back and have to change every single application that needs that, right? And so if you have this layer that loosely couples or decouples the application from all of the different identity sources that the application needs, then what you've done is you've shielded the application from all of the inadequacies or all the complexities that exist within the environment, which have to exist. Right? So for the application developer or for the application owner, it's very easy. Just point me somewhere. I'm going to make a request. It could be LDAP, it could be REST, it could be a number of other protocols, including some of the federation protocols. And I know that I'm going to get what I need in the format, schema, and structure that I need it. And I'm going to get the ability to not only understand the basic information about that user, but all of the context around that user that can be represented in different hierarchies.
I facetiously made a comment about predicting a hurricane in September, but there are future situations that you have to adapt to, and many of the future situations you cannot predict what's going to happen. I mean,
Absolutely.
You'd love to be able to predict a hurricane. It could be anything, and it could be something that has happened that it can't be. So you have to have a flexible system, not only for adapting to things today, but also down the road in the future.
Yeah. Anytime there's change, you have to do two things. You have to respect what's there, and you can't break that, and you have to be able to adapt to that change. And so if you look at, from a technology perspective, what Radiant does with the Federated Identity Service, we connect to everything that's there, we rationalize it, and we expose it to the consumer at the speed of a directory where you have guaranteed availability, guaranteed performance, and guaranteed scalability.
Last night I was talking to a gentleman who started his own company. He just left the federal government. and we talked about just 5-weight strategies, and it was a good discussion. But just remember, he just left the federal government. Well, what about his privileges and his rights there? Did it automatically end? Was it time out? I mean, was there a policy involved in that? And what privileges does he have right now? I mean, he may be able to log in. I mean, this is a key concept here with people coming and going all the time.
Yeah, and in many cases, you never know. And so people look at solving this problem from 3 different dimensions. They look at the governance aspect of it. Who can do what, right? Give me a report on who has access to this resource, or here's a person, tell me what they can do. They look at it from an administration perspective. When somebody joins the organization, I want them to have these rights. When somebody leaves or changes their function or role or title, I want to change their access rights. And certainly when they leave, I want to revoke everything that they have.
That's it.
Right? And then you look at that from a real-time access perspective, and all of those policies have to be not only in place and understood, but they have to be enforced at the right time.
And I wrote down the word automated, because you can't have a checklist every morning and say, okay, Dieter's here, John, okay. What are you going to do it for 40,000 people? You can't. It's got to be automated.
You absolutely cannot. You have to automate this, and you have to rely on business people being able to translate that into technology or vice versa. And you have to make it so that this is sustainable going forward.
Yeah, a sustainable, flexible process that can adapt to future requirements. And this mobile world is this big tsunami that's affecting us. It has to adapt to that as well.
Absolutely. And the key is there's a lot of heavy lifting that has to happen here. If you do it once and you do it right, and you provide it as a service to anything that needs to consume it, you're much better off than doing the same work over and over again.
That's the definition of scalable.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank today's guest, Dieter Schuler, Vice President of Business Development, Radiant Logic. I'm John Gilroy on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Radiant Logic.